Hi Sarah, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm really pleased we've managed to make this chat work I know you're super busy at the moment, so thanks for making time for it.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to be really direct. I'm just going to throw loads of questions at you because I know lots of people, when they hear your name, you have this formidable reputation as being one of the best sailors in the world after taking part in the Volvo Ocean Race with SCA back in 14-15. But you're doing so much. So you didn't exactly stop, did you, after that? You've been keep on going, climbing mountains. You're now studying. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened after the Volvo for you?
Yeah, so we with SCA, we had a couple years of training prior as well, so it was a pretty long campaign, and it was an amazing experience and a huge challenge. And even just the trial process for being a part of the team was, I would say, as big as a challenge as the race itself. Different types of challenges and different types of stressors, but as big. So when the entire process of that ended after about 2.5 years, it was a very big, I wanted to sleep for 6 months, but I also was kind of wanted to have the next thing. And for all of us at that time, we wanted to do the next Volvo as an all-female team or a mixed team, but we really just wanted to create opportunities to continue to sail together at high levels, because we just thought, the momentum of what we had built up in the Volvo and with SCA was really important to try to maintain that. And, we'd seen it historically where women would come in and be a part of a big campaign and perform really well and get to a level of experience, but there was no kind of stepping stone following.
Sure.
So we knew that was a big part of it. And when we finished with our sponsor about 6 months after the race, we ended up coming together as a group of sailors and created the Magenta Project.
Yeah.
And, initially we were using that as a platform to move forward to find sponsorship. And we had kind of set a deadline on that. I think January 2017 was going to be the hard stop date. If we didn't have money at that point, we didn't have enough time to train and get a team together successfully before the race started in the fall of that year. So
Sounds like a very pragmatic approach, giving yourself a hard deadline.
Well, it's just realistic. It was a very huge undertaking logistically and otherwise. And so, we were in mindset to support. We wanted to do it well. And, we had a lot writing on the fact of, trying to be better, continue to be better. So we didn't want to kind of do a half effort on any. So that's very realistic, hard.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the fall of 2016, I had just been kind of my own adventures, and I had just come back from Nepal with a trip to Everest Base Camp. And we were starting to get nervous that we hadn't found any money at that point. And they would imply a rule where women had to be a part of the team for the next race. Okay. Well, they didn't have to be a part of the team. It was a deficit if you did.
Sure. Yeah.
So it wasn't required. They didn't force teams to have women. They just made it an incentive to have more hands on board if you included women in your team. And, very quickly after that race started, people realized that they needed the extra hands and they couldn't do it without including women on their team. Mm-hmm. So at that point for me, I was kind of in a vulnerable position where I had been one of the least experienced with SCA. And initially the teams weren't talking about taking women. So I knew there'd only be a handful of spots available. And there's, really amazing women from Team SCA that were much more qualified than me. So I knew that they would be picked first. It doesn't mean I didn't want to do it. I certainly did. And I was a part of as a backup or a part of a team that didn't end up finishing with their sponsorship, and then as a backup for several teams throughout the entire race. So I still tried to do it, but I just never, I packed multiple times. I got visas. I did all of my, certifications that I needed to do, but it just didn't end up happening for me. So in the meantime, I had, been inspired to attempt something like Mount Everest and kind of laid out a plan as to how I would do that. And then kind
No, but
of,
most people would have gone like done a few regattas, a few small sailing races, but you're like, I've been inspired to climb Mount Everest because I can't do the sailing version of Everest. So I'm just
yeah,
going to climb a
well,
mountain.
yeah, I wanted a challenge that was equal to the Volvo
Sure.
Ocean Race. And, you know, it's known as the Mount Everest of Sailing. And I had just come back from Nepal, and, you know, it's a very inspiring place. And I knew that something like climbing Everest would not be a quick feat in terms of, you know, I was going to do years of training. So I laid out a plan for that. And part of that plan was sponsorship.
Sure. I was going to ask you about that next, yeah, about the whole training. How do you, when you say you lay out a plan to train, is it's sort of like half the sponsorship, half the battle? Do you divide your days up, just being like, I'm going to do this much of sponsorship time, this much physical training? How does it work?
So I laid it out, you know, you have to do a big picture and then you need to narrow it down. So you need to look at, you know, if I want to climb Mount Everest in 2 years, what are the things that I need to do and how do I achieve each of those things and what needs to go in place, you know, on a daily basis. So let's say I wanted to climb 2 mountains a year, bigger mountain training peaks. What did I need to do every day for that? So yeah, each day was devoted to about 3 hours a day in the gym. Then the other half of the day was usually devoted to training. And that would kind of, you know, differ if I like specifically went to Colorado or France to train in the mountains. It was more about, you know, going and training for like 6 weeks at a time and then spending time after that, like on content or
Right, because at the same time,
or,
with that, when you say, are you with anyone when you're doing this? Do you have a team? Because you're trying to get sponsorship at the same time. So presumably you're still trying to do that in the wings, but you're also, you've got to train, you've got to find money. Do you use trainers? Like, how do you organize the training?
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I mean, most everything is kind of like on my own or with a certain group of people for a particular thing. So for example, I've been sponsored for a couple of years by Sailing Performance Training. So they helped me with like a training regime. And so I had like a daily program from them. I probably did like my first year or 2 in the mountains without them. This is now like my 4th year in the project, but the project's kind of been on the, you know, back burner for the past year, but we can talk about that later. Yeah, so the physical side was, you know, working with a trainer and a nutritionist. It is a different type of nutrition demand, like equal caloric demand, but different type of nutrition demand than the ocean racing.
Okay. Tell me more about that. That sounds fascinating.
Well, it's, I mean, your heart rate is really high for long periods of time for, you know, you're burning like 6,000 calories a day when you're out climbing, and you end up like using up your glucose levels very quickly. Whereas sailing is more like a start, stop.
More explosive. Yeah. It's more explosive.
Yeah.
Action.
So if you think of it in terms of like just training in a gym, sailing is more like a CrossFit type of workout.
Sure.
Like a hard 20 minutes, you know, followed by a 10-minute cool down type of situation. Whereas mountain climbing is like a really high paced stairmaster for hours on end. And that combination comes from not the fact that you're walking quickly, but the fact that there's less oxygen and you often have like an ice axe involved or a pole and you're carrying a heavy weight on your back or your hips as well. It's just a huge level of exertion. And it's more about like your cardiovascular system, core, legs, whereas sailing was like upper body, explosive power, strength, and endurance.
Sure. God, I'm exhausted just hearing about it. It sounds incredible though, but my goodness, you must be hugely goal orientated. Can I ask you as well about injury? Because I know you were 19,000 feet, weren't you, up Denali last year? So close to summiting, but you had to turn back.
Yeah. And I mean, I did have a couple of injuries on the mountain, but the injuries were not actually what forced me to turn around. Like I ended up with a chest infection, which at sea level would have been, you know, tedious and tiring, but at that altitude, it just manifests much bigger. And at the exact time that it was happening, you have to be very conscious of how altitude is affecting your body, your mobility, and your brain function. And if you're not entirely sure what's happening to you physiologically, it can be very scary.
And you're in control of making all of those decisions, aren't you? Like when you're doing the Volvo, of course, you're in a team and, you can't get off, whereas you have to choose to turn around.
Yeah, you are definitely the one that gets to choose that, unless you don't have that type of self-discipline and you would push yourself to a place where it became other people's responsibility, which I have no interest in doing. It's not other people's responsibility to monitor me to make sure that I'm okay. There's a rope team and you're in a team climbing. But
you're the head of that team.
Well, you are in charge of yourself. You're a grown up, you have made the decision to be there, and people are relying on you to make safe decisions about your own safety because it affects their safety. And so there's an element, and it's the same thing in all extreme sports. Like, you need to be able to trust the people around you. They're going to make the right decisions for the team. And sometimes that means, as an individual on a mountain, the thing you need to do is go down.
That's what always I find interesting, and from all the women that I've spoken to, is that people presume that adventurers they love taking risks. It's like they're actually the most risk adverse people, because in order to survive in the environments they're in, they have to calculate risk so diligently. It's incredibly impressive and finite. That's absolutely so interesting. So that's part of the 7 Seas, 7 Summits, your mission after doing Volvo, to climb, after you've sailed the 7 Seas, to climb the highest 7 peaks. You've managed 3 and a bit.
You're gonna 7, 8.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'm not calling like 19,000 feet up to Nali a bit. You know what I mean. But which is so impressive, because you would be the first woman ever to have done that. One man's done it, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Have you called him up? Have you been like, what did you do? How?
Ironically, the other day, I got an email to my website, and it was just a woman from Hawaii reaching out, and she's actually friends with that gentleman.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, I've been trying to get a hold of this guy for like 2 years, messaging him through his website and social media, and I haven't been able to get a hold of him. And actually really hard to get a hold of Guinness. You can email them, and if you don't pay an expedited fee, it can take like up to 6 to 8 months. I think it took 8 months last time I sent them an email to get a reply. So I wanted to talk about orders for the oceans, and he did the record. It's not like he started with that intention from zero. He was like at a point already through various oceans, and a friend had passed away, and that friend's goal was to do the 7 summits. And I think this gentleman had already done some, and then he wanted to complete the challenge.
Oh, I see. But where are you at with it, if you don't mind me asking? Because obviously, because of Corona, things must have shut down a lot of your training.
Yeah. I mean, about, I guess, exactly a year ago, a year and 1 month ago, it was kind of proposed to me to take on the double-handed offshore Olympic class in the US. We don't have a lot of females in the US that have a high level of ocean racing experience. And one of the other women who is, particularly gifted, Sally Barkow, she is just at a point in her life where she's not interested in a full Olympic campaign. So it kind of was passed down to me or to me through other people. And so I worked with a project manager for the past year to make that team happen. So what I needed to decide was, I was at a point looking for sponsorship where I felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. So I needed to figure out a way that I could finish the project financially on my own. So that could have meant, a 4-year Olympic campaign and then going back to it. And obviously, sailing is a huge passion of mine, and it's also my career, and it's something I've given 10 years to. And to have an opportunity like that, to be a part of, the Olympics, and to be training for that. I mean, I love training, and I love being a professional athlete. Yeah. I love that being like the structure of every day for me. Okay. So I was all for it. So the climbing needed to take a back seat for a while and move forward with that Olympic campaign. So that's what I did for the past year.
Wow, God, yeah. You do not stop, do you? It's amazing. Do you think you're different from other people generally, or do you just think you're just a very goal-orientated, driven person?
My friend and I had a conversation about this last night, and I think, as you grow up, I think there's outside influences, and they can be your family members, or people around you, or maybe even your friends. And then I think whatever that is transfers to you to a certain point where it comes from you, because there's no way that you could do the things that I've done, or the things that I plan on doing, if you were doing it for other people.
No.
Or for the wrong reasons. There's motivation to be found in a lot of different places in life, and internally I have a lot of drive, and I have really high expectations of what I would like to do and what I would like to achieve. And so the biggest thing for me is not having discipline or finding goals. It's really, generally, it's about finding the money to achieve those goals, because big goals cost a lot of money, unfortunately.
I know, that's it. It's the money question, isn't it? Which I was going to come on to, because as you say, you can do the physical challenge, but it's finding the money. And a lot of people don't realize that sponsorship is so difficult to get, isn't it? You can often get kit or other things, but how do you face that hardship? Like, how do you keep getting out of bed, keep sending the emails?
I think it's just, the overriding thing is that you really want to do it. You really want to do the project. You really want to work hard to try to facilitate that. It is very difficult to continue to get no's and continue to be vulnerable. But that was one of the biggest things I needed to get past, was speaking about it and letting people know that I needed help to finish this project. It's money is something that's a very sensitive topic worldwide, really.
Yeah.
So it's never a comfortable thing for me to approach people about it, even a company, because this is something that I'm so passionate about, like the project, and that, is most of the time a level of obsession. I don't know how I would do it if I wasn't obsessed with it, because it's just way too hard.
Yeah, I bet. Why is that, do you think? What do you think it is that you think doing 7 Seas, 7 Summits will give you?
It goes so many different levels.
Yeah, sorry, it's an impossible question, isn't it? How do you think you feel after doing the thing you haven't done yet?
Yeah, to me, it's a really inspiring goal. For myself, and I think for other people to see. And I think for women to see other women achieve something that's never been done before, and that's just such a big project, because it's not like I'm walking up the Amazon backwards for the first time. I'm doing something that's so diverse and such a huge challenge, that there's not really any way to minimize it.
No.
And I feel like that can be a really empowering thing for other women.
Definitely. And
none of these things are, you would call my inherent strength. I didn't grow up sailing. I didn't grow up climbing mountains. I didn't have anyone kind of take me by the hand and lead me into those things. There are things that at one point in my life, generally much later in life, I made a choice and figure out a way to accomplish those things. So, that just messaging wise, I think is quite powerful as well.
I completely agree. And it's that you're not stopping. You could stop after doing Volvo, after being part of the first all-female team to do Volvo. You could be like, I've done it. I've gone around Cape Horn. I've had this mad time. I've inspired a whole generation of young female sailors and male sailors. But you haven't. You're then right, what's my next challenge? And you're still going. You're still, what's my next challenge?
Yeah.
And do you think, I wanted to ask you, do you think it's harder to get sponsorship as a woman generally, or it's just tough?
I think it's just tough, really. Okay. I think I've never heard of anyone who had an easy time of it.
No.
I think, potentially in the sailing world, it's easier. For men's teams, I've heard reasoning for sponsoring men's teams that, we want to sponsor a team that has potential to win. Which when you look at performance-wise, you can comprehend that statement. But I feel like most companies that would be entering the race would be interested in marketing value, which women, like as Team SCA proved, was a much more valuable investment. So yeah, I think you run into that a bit in the sailing world. But I don't know in the realm that I'm working in, if it's easier or harder as a man.
No, that's good to hear. I was interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to ask you, just before we move on to the really exciting thing that you're doing at the moment, what scares you? Because when I used to work for Alex Thompson, I found it bonkers that I suddenly realised that he wasn't scared of dying or falling off the boat or any of the normal things that would concern me. He's just scared about losing. That's the most scary thing to him. And I find that really interesting. For you, is that the same? Is it not managing to summit these peaks?
Yeah, it's not the thing that scares me the most, but yeah, not achieving the thing that I'm working towards, is probably one of my qualities that I, am most devastated by. And, one of the things that I'm actively trying to avoid is, failure in those things, because not as if I decide to go packing for the weekend and I don't reach my objective and then I get to go home and it took 3 days of planning and 2 days of packing. It's, these are things that take like a year at a time, to plan and to pack and to train and then to be on the mountain, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars. So it's just no part of what it takes is small. So that kind of expounds like the failure factor. It doesn't mean that I beat myself up mentally over the failure. Like I rationalize everything and I prepare for that beforehand as well, because something I think that people don't often understand is that it is a knife edge between failure and success. And a lot of people kind of react the same to failure and to success when there are these big, long challenges where people think like, God, aren't you just so excited and aren't you just rejoicing? And you're like, well, I almost didn't make it. It took a month to climb up there. So I had a month to process everything as it was happening. And then failure is often, so close to having achieved it that you give it the same weight, and like studying the psychology of failure, like you should give it the same weight, as success. So if you're successful at something, celebrate for 2 days. If you fail at something, let it out for 2 days and then move on.
That was very good advice. And as you said, the magic word there, psychology of it. Talk to me about Harvard. Talk to me about what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah. So, as I said, the past year I've been working on the Olympic campaign. We were successful in, I was over in France training the first half of this year. And then came back to the US. We were still able to sign with a sponsor. And I was let go from the team very shortly after that. Reasonings of, I don't have an Olympic background, so I don't have the high level driving that some coaches felt like may be a key element. So I was let go for that reason.
How does that make you feel? Can I ask, because you're obviously absolutely amazing at handling hardship, but just that felt like I was punched in the stomach and I'm not you.
Yeah, there's different aspects of it. Sports are competitions and they're competitive, and I had a year at it, and then if they decide that they need a different type of person, then that's what they have to do, because their goal is to win a medal in the Olympics. Their goal is not to make me happy
or hold your hand. Yeah.
Their goal is not to make me feel okay.
Yeah.
So, after that, to me, it just felt like I had this ball of intention and energy that I had been planning to give towards the Olympics for the next 4 years. And I'd already done a year of it. And, so I was very in my headspace. I was in it. And when that opportunity was taken away, the one thing I can't do in my life is wallow and dwell. It's not that I don't reflect on things. It's just that I need to become active, and I think about those things in the process. It's important to sit through those things and like recognize the emotions as they're coming and deal with them rather than trying to just suppress them. But something that I've been looking at for several years and something that's really interested me is psychology. And, I've been looking at things like life coaching, and I just felt like they weren't authentic enough. The life coaching industry is not regulated the way that, psychology, like clinical coaching, therapy, it's not regulated in the same capacity. Okay. So like I want to be as authentic as possible. So if I would like to, be a part of the performance psychology field, then I need to have an education in it and not just have experience like I've had, although that experience is really going to lend itself to the degree. So I'll feel quite strong coming out of it with those two sides, So I'm now enrolled, I'm now full-time in it, a program through Harvard for psychology. And, the first semester is kind of getting some of the harder required classes out of the way. So they're not as like fun, but I do have one fun class called Stress Coping and Resilience. And, that's basically what the past 10 years of my life have been about.
Amazing. It must be so fascinating to see it from the other side, to see it from the psychological side.
It is. And
it can be your own case study. You're gonna...
we were talking about that this morning, like finishing my project could be my thesis. Because although I'm like, this is my own project and I'm like, training on a daily basis on my own and things like that, there's I don't go into the mountains alone. Like I train in the mountains alone, but I won't go climb a big mountain. I mean, most of the time I don't have those skill sets, number one. And number two, you need other people.
Yeah, 100%. So is that your ultimate goal? You're going to keep studying psychology whilst climbing your summits and keep going with 7 Seas, 7 Summits?
Yes. Yeah. Now that, the Olympic opportunity is gone, we focus on the climbing project and, while I'm going to school. So I've actually just moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. My plan was to be in Chamonix. Okay. It's a great place to train, and I have a lot of friends there and friends that come here. And like my way of kind of staying a part of, that side of my life. Yeah. But with COVID, it's not an option. So it's, I've had to make some just really huge transitions. And so I put myself in the mountains in the US, in one of the best places, most beautiful places in the country. And I have friends here and I have family about 4 hours away. Okay. So, I mean, even just being in one place that's huge.
Yeah, I bet. Quite right. It sounds like you're adapting and surviving. Smart. I'm not surprised.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not like it's just all, smooth sailing and easy transitions. Like it's been very overwhelming this week, starting all my classes and seeing like what the expectations are and even just managing my own expectations, because I have very high expectations for myself, in terms of like what I can accomplish and what I'm capable of, but you need to be realistic as well. So I had a hard sit down last night, kind of with myself and then with my dad to just like talk things through and just, realizing like what's best for me right now.
Yeah. And how do you do that? Because you must have had to sacrifice so much over the years, whether it's your time, your personal time, maybe relationships, family, all of these things. You must be constantly weighing up, is what I'm doing worth it? How do you do that?
I could show you.
Oh, wow. Do.
I know, it sounds crazy. It'll take me a minute to find one of these, but I do this quite often, with various things. And this is my decision-making process and how I break things down. And what I do is, I take the options and then I write out the things that are most important to me at the time. And then I give things weight. And,
Interesting.
you know, that's always going to change at different points in your life. And that's what you need to recognize, is that what was important to you 5 years ago, those things probably aren't, you know, they might still be important to you, but they might not be as important.
Definitely.
Goodness, I'm not finding, oh, okay. So yeah, I literally write down like what the options are. Then I write down like what the important things are, or either way, whichever one has more.
And you give them a mark, like, out of how many?
Yeah. So I give a weight to the things that are important. And then I go and I see, you know, what is this option of, let's say, doing the Olympics? How does it align with what my desire is? And then I give it a weight, and then I multiply that.
What an amazingly strategic approach to something that could be so like emotional.
Yeah. And then at the bottom, you have a total. And then you can say, you know, these two things are definitely not the right thing for me. These two things are potentials. And sometimes you say, this is the most pragmatic thing for me to do, or most logical thing, but like in my heart, this other option is best for me. So you have to give a little bit of space to see what's best for you. Or if you're in a position where like you can't go with your gut, you need to go with your bank account. You know, you have to give a little wiggle room for being pragmatic.
It makes total sense, and it's breaking down the scary, isn't it? It's making the seemingly like overwhelming stuff more manageable.
Yeah, I mean,
great. I know what I'm doing later. I was gonna do Sarah's chart. Coin it now. Did you learn it from anyone, or did you just, as like a method you learned for yourself?
My stepdad and I sat down when I was like 16, and for something I was trying to make a decision about, and I think we just kind of made it up, and I've been using it my whole adult life. It's when things are really difficult to make a choice about, like such as yesterday, I had, you know, when all of these things are in your head, it's like a Rubik's cube that you're trying to solve virtually. Mm-hmm. And that's not, it's much better to have things like written down and to see them. And I think it just gives you a little bit of focus and a little bit of clarity, but it just organizes your thoughts a little bit. And then I sat down last night to do that, and my dad called, and I was able to explain it because I've been going over it so much in my head. I was able to lay out all the options, and then we went through them. And really, it's just that some of my priorities have changed, but I'm conscious of them, but I hadn't like subconsciously enacted them yet. Yeah. So I think I needed to give myself permission to allow those things into my life and to create space for them. You know, to not treat my life on a daily basis like it's an Olympic campaign, or some sort of high performance 100 miles an hour type of thing. And to give myself like, you know, space to have a life just timing wise, but also emotionally, rather than feeling like everything has to be this really hard forward movement all the time. 90% of my life can be like that, but I'm going to give myself 10% to slow down.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fascinating. And it must be, I suppose it must be feeding into the narrative of your course as well. And yeah, I'm excited for you.
Yeah, it's really difficult because when you want to, or you're trying to achieve things that are very big and very difficult, it takes a huge amount of effort.
Oh, and tell me about it. And self-belief when no one else believes in you. It's exhausting.
Yeah. And so I don't know how to achieve really big things unless I'm giving everything to it. And I'm just trying to find a little bit of balance. Like I said, 90-10.
Yeah. This is amazing. I feel like I need to call up your stepdad and be like, hey, can we talk about a few things? I've got a lot going on right now. Anyway, back to you, Sarah. If someone's listening, I want to ask you, and they want advice, and they're thinking about trying to look for sponsorship for something and going to do a huge challenge, what would you sort of, in a sentence, what would you tell them to do?
I mean, I kind of tell people that I'm not the best person to ask about sponsorship because that is a puzzle I have not solved yet. But I would approach it the way I approach everything else. You know, you need to look at the big picture, at what you need. And then you need to look at what you're giving in exchange, because sometimes sponsorship gets confused with charity. It's not charity. It is a outlet for marketing. So you need to look at what points of your project are marketable, how you are marketable as a person, and how you can essentially sell that to a sponsor. And you can say, these are the things I can provide for you. This is the messaging that we can do together. And, you got to do a little bit of a case study as well with the organizations that you're potentially pitching to see, how your life aligns with their mottos, or, their corporate social responsibility works with the charities that you've been working with for 2 years, or, there needs to be an alignment there, rather than just saying, hey guys, I want to do this really cool thing. Does anyone want to give me money?
Yeah, there's got to be a why. There's got to be so much else nowadays.
Well, and it's in exchange of goods. You are, when I talk about sponsorship, I'm fully expecting to have to be an ambassador for them, do speaking engagements for them, do, social media marketing pushes, Facebook lives. There's an expectation of, what you are giving back to. So you need to approach sponsorship as an exchange rather than a one-way funnel of money into your life, because that's not practical.
That's useful. Thank you. Speaking about mottos, can I ask you my 10 top fire questions now? It's a good time. So Did you have a look at them, or were you good?
I did. I glanced. I didn't want to make any, scripted.
No, that's good. That's the way I like it. Okay, do you know who I got these from? I feel like you might find this interesting. So Marcel Proust was a French essayist back in the day. I think it was at the turn of the century, 18th century, and he devised 35 questions that he believed would reveal an individual's true nature if you ask them. But I'm not going to ask you 35 because I realize time is precious and you've got lots to do. So I whittled it down to a top 10, which I think reveals a lot about someone. Don't worry, I'll make everyone do this. Okay, number 1. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Happiness to me is comfort. And, as we were saying earlier, that always changes. So sometimes self, or it's about it's about being happy with where you are at that moment and who you are at that moment. Be on the side of a cliff, that can be nestling down, in your sleeping bag in the middle of the Southern Ocean, and breathing in the life of the amazing people around you. And, that is happiness to me. It can be cuddling with your niece on the couch watching a movie. So yeah, it's just those moments of peace. I think that's happiness to me.
I agree. And how cool that you've done both. I love it. Number 2, what is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is working really hard for things and not achieving them. That doesn't mean, climbing a mountain and not getting the last 1,300 feet, because it's, some of those things, just their increment of a whole year or 3 years of planning. And so you did all of these things correctly. You just didn't do the last 1,300 feet correctly. And, mountains probably aren't the greatest analogy, because if you don't stand on the geographical point at the top, you didn't do it. Maybe crossing an ocean is a better analogy, but, when you race across an ocean, just because you don't finish first, it doesn't feel like you didn't race across the ocean.
No, I completely agree.
I think it's probably to be so afraid of failing that I wouldn't start something. I think that's probably being so intimidated by something that I'm afraid to take the risk to even try. I never want to get to that point.
Good. I don't think you will. Number 3, what is the trait you most deplore in yourself?
Currently procrastination.
Don't.
It's not just procrastination. It's this hyper vigilance of perfectionism. that makes it really difficult to start things because I feel like I have to be so prepared and things have to be done at such a high level. It's crippling. If I could let some of that go, I could be so much more productive or even successful with things. So yeah, it's something, it drives me up the wall.
I know. I don't, let me know when you figure it out, because I spent all my time trying to work. I've had an egg timer, you know, for 15 minutes. So you concentrate for 15 minutes on one thing, you do something else. I actually went to like a webinar the other day, and they had a strategy called Name Your Frog or something. And so you because lots of people put things off, don't they? Because it means so much to them. And then you feel crap about yourself that you haven't done it. So you beat yourself up. So it's this horrible vicious cycle of basically, you know, self-attack. Yeah. And so then I've started writing like on post-it notes everywhere, name your frog, and then it just stresses me out so much. Anyway, let me know when you figure it out, because I would need to know. Number 4, what is the trait you most deplore in other people?
Unreliability, probably. Like that's a big one for me because I always try to be accountable. So I get really disappointed when people let me down. Yeah, I think that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves.
That's not annoying. 5, what occasion do you lie?
Probably like to myself when I say, I'm going to get that done this morning.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all default to white lies to an extent, where, you know, we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I mean, I feel like that's the only appropriate way where it should be used. And that's probably something that we almost do on like, you know, without consciousness. We don't tell someone like the full extent of something because we don't want to worry them or we don't want to hurt their feelings or something.
Yeah, protective mistruths, I'll call them. What do you consider to be your greatest achievement? You've got quite a lot.
You know, the mountain project is the peaks that I've summited and the things that I've done in between them, and the charity that I supported throughout. I really did that by myself. You know, it's not that I didn't have, like, my family is hugely supportive, but in terms of like day in, day out, I'm alone and I have to be disciplined to do in my head one day. And then I stood at top of, you know, these giant mountains all over the world. I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I'd say so. Amazing. There's lots to choose from. And also, it doesn't sound like you procrastinate that much.
I think probably making Team SCA was probably the biggest like thing that I felt like, my God, I cannot believe I managed to do this.
I can believe you managed it. Okay, number 7. What is your motto?
Motto. Well, I think something that's really important, and I have to tell myself this a lot, is if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. You know, like your dreams aren't big enough. Like whatever that cliche quote is, if you're achieving everything in your life, you should be setting bigger goals for yourself. You know, you should do things that scare you. Like I am terrified to take on a graduate studies program at Harvard. Like it is seriously intimidating. It is something well out of my comfort zone at this point. Like I've been in professional athletics for 10 years. It's a huge transition. I could do really poorly, you know, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And
nothing gets achieved from staying in your comfort zones. I know it's another cliche, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. It's
why
like
comfortable.
Yeah, even though I just said my point of happiness is being comfortable.
Yeah, but that's okay. But it's like you need all the other bits, don't you, to get to that point of happiness. I reckon that's what ocean racing taught me, is that I needed to have less to be comfortable in my life.
Yeah, and the way I described happiness was moments. It wasn't like an overarching all day.
Yeah, you wouldn't be happy if you were cuddling your niece all the time on the sofa.
No, because her shows are terrible.
Don't. My nephew makes me watch Peppa Pig all the time.
Oh,
No. Okay. What is your greatest regret?
um,
Or maybe you don't have any.
well, no, I certainly have regret,
Oh.
but I don't have like there's not like one that jumps out. I guess this isn't like a huge regret, but it's just something that I wish I had integrated into my sailing career, is that because I ended up on a fast track, um, I missed out on a lot of like the basics of getting any like high level skill sets in terms of like sail making or being a rigger or a boat builder or stuff like that. So like, there was things we did at SCA and trainings and working with winches and hydraulics and stuff, but I just didn't really get to have like that foundation where it could have made me a more rounded sailor.
Okay.
And could have provided more opportunities in my career outside of strictly just being a sailor. It's not that I don't enjoy and love the crap out of just being a sailor, but it would have made my career, I think, a lot easier if I would have just kind of had like foundational pieces. But yeah, that's something I always wished that I had.
Yeah. Still time. Maybe you're a bit busy at the moment, but
I'm super busy.
What is which historical figure do you most identify with?
Oh, identify. Oh, living or dead?
Yeah, anyone you like.
I have no idea.
That's okay.
I mean, my mom is someone that's like a huge inspiration to me, like particularly when I was younger and how I approached. My mom was the first female U.S. Marshal in the state of Wyoming, and she went to school, like didn't even finish high school, and went to school to finish high school and college and university, and became the first female U.S. Marshal in Wyoming. And she did that with 4 kids at home, and I was a baby when she started that process. And I think I was 6 when she became a U.S. Marshal. And I mean, I guess in a lot of ways that's inspired me to like not have excuses for things. So I probably, it's my mom as well, so I relate to her a lot, but I also just like, I really admire her.
Yeah, I bet. Amazing. I do too now. I'm like, what a badass. Now I can see where you get it from.
She's cool.
Yeah. Cool. Good to have cool mums. Number 10. I hate asking this, but I have to ask it. How would you like to die?
I mean, I don't really care.
Yeah. That's probably the most rational response.
I don't want to, die in a highway accident on my way to see family. Like, I guess if I was going to die in something, I would want it to be during a big expedition of some sort where I was trying to achieve something. I guess I don't want to have like a benign death. I don't have any real particular desire to be like super old. That may change. Like, I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I don't have a partner. Maybe that would change if I felt like I was supposed to be spending the rest of my life living for other people. But I very much, I'm 35 and I'm alone, so I don't really care.
But you're
I don't
killing it
for my family. Like, I care about that.
Yeah.
But I think I'd probably rather die on a mountain than in the ocean.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. I wonder which would be quicker. Sorry, now I'm just going down a morose train of thought. I'm like, which would be quicker? Well, I suppose if you went overboard in the Southern Ocean, it might be quick. Whereas I'm trying to think of Everest down a crevasse.
Yeah, the Clipper race, where there was a girl who passed away in the North Pacific, and then they did an at-sea burial. That
Sara.
like really bothered me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, how can it not?
Well, I want my body to come back to my family. Whereas like the idea of, I don't know, like falling down a cliff face or freezing to death on a mountain, that doesn't bother me. And the idea of my body staying there forever also doesn't bother me. But for some reason, the sea burial thing was just terrifying. Yeah. So clip in.
Yeah, always clip on. We had a thing called COD, which is clip on dickhead. So we just shouted at each other, we're like, COD. Anyway, not the point that I thought I'd end my interview with you on. Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I mean, something that we were addressing in class the other night, the class, stress coping and resilience, right? So they were saying that resiliency is not, you don't look at a person and say like, they're resilient. You also don't look at someone and say like, they're risky. Like these are untangible things. And like the point that I brought up is, they're almost like a muscle. So like to be resilient, you have to keep pushing yourself into places where you're uncomfortable. But those things are also relative. So like my goals are super big, and it is Everest, and it is climbing these mountains and sailing oceans. But like everyone has those things in their life. Like you just scale it, scale it. Like what is your Everest? What's the thing you're working towards? And, the way you address risk is by pushing the boundaries slowly so that you become comfortable with something. And like that is a form of resilience as well. But if you don't push those boundaries, they close in. And if you don't exercise resilience, it's not a part of your life. So don't placate your days with always trying to be comfortable and never stepping outside of your zone, because when things happen that are out of our control, you don't have any coping mechanisms. You don't have any healthy coping mechanisms. Like we all know that people want to sit down at night and watch a movie and drink a glass of wine and eat a tub of ice cream.
Sure.
That's fine, but that shouldn't be your default, and that shouldn't be your constant. So it's like people's goals, they're all relative to each of us. And, you need to practice resiliency, and you need to practice risk and getting out of your comfort zone. And that's really how you grow those areas of your life. It's not about just thinking really hard about it. You need to exercise it.
Yeah. You smashed it out of the park, Sarah. You've saved it from my like diabolical comments. Thank you so much. It's fascinating.
Leave my body on the side of a mountain. So
hey, right there with you. Thank you. Honestly, you've said so many interesting things. Anyone listening is going to be behind you. I just need to win the lottery now so I can give you all the money you need to go and smash these mountains out the park.
Great. That would be so great. At this point, I would even take lottery money to pay for school. So if anyone's handing out lottery money, school is like, it's overwhelming in every direction.
You're going to nail it. You're already smashing it. It's just the next adventure. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much.